There's a very interesting account on Twitter that is oddly named Name Redacted. So obviously, this is a guy who wants to be anonymous, but he seems to be, if it's a he, a very well-informed guy because he did a Twitter thread recently, which I saw, and as I scrolled through it, it is name after name after name after name of deep state operative, someone who worked in the national security apparatus or the CIA or the FBI, and now they work in the censorship apparatus of Meta, Facebook, or Google, or Twitter. So in other words, what Name Redacted is getting at in what turned out to be a 30-part post, so a thread that went for 30 postings, he was saying, look, we think of the deep state, the FBI, the CIA, as interfering in the operations of these social media platforms. He goes, no. What you really have is that a large procession of people have moved from the deep state to these social media platforms, and they are running things over there. So the deep state is now in the digital platforms. And again, this guy seemed to really have chapter and verse on this, so I shared his post. And now I see that the journalist John Solomon has picked up on it in a very interesting article in Just the News. And he says that his investigation building on Name Redacted and checking out those details and confirming that, yeah, this guy did used to be at the FBI and yeah, he's now at a big tech platform. He found, quote, at least 200 former workers of the Central Intelligence Agency, the FBI, the National Security Agency, the National Security Council, the Homeland Security Department, all have now somehow landed in Silicon Valley, many with, quote, content moderation units regulating supposed disinformation. Now, wow. I mean, think about it. These guys have been trained at taxpayer expense, in many cases, to go after foreign adversaries, to go after Islamic terrorists, to go after other types of terrorists around the world, to get information on the Chinese military, or even domestically, to go after criminal networks and crime syndicates, the mafia. And they're taking all this knowledge and now offering it for sale to very high bidders in Silicon Valley. So they get out of the deep state, but then they go back into sort of a mini deep state at Twitter or a mini deep state at Google or at Facebook. Let's look at a couple of examples. Here's Aaron Berman. He spent a decade and a half as a CIA analyst before joining Facebook's parent Meta as, quote, product policy manager for disinformation. You've probably heard of James Baker, the former FBI general counsel, by the way, happily recently fired by Elon Musk, but he was Twitter's chief lawyer. And this is what John Solomon kind of amusingly calls it, the spooks to Silicon Valley pipeline. And he goes, it's not just a typical FBI crime-fighting operative. He goes, there are all these sort of people who ran psychological operations or psyops in the deep state. Again, this was all aimed initially at foreign enemies. And now what are they doing? They are on big tech platforms turning Americans into enemies, turning Americans into sort of domestic political opponents, and of course promoting not just a deep state, but a left-wing ideological agenda. Amazingly, some of these characters even post videos online in which they talk about their new job and how cool it is and how they now get to decide what gets seen and what gets not seen, what gets spoken and what gets not spoken. And these are people, once you look at them and check them out, you realize how left-wing they are. Nick Rossman, former CIA analyst, a current senior manager of trust and safety at Google, was prominently a Hillary Clinton supporter. And at one point he said that, quote, anti-vaxxers are like Nazis. Jacqueline Lepore, another Hillary Clinton supporter, another former CIA analyst. She served for 10 years in the CIA. She's now senior manager of Intel Collection, Trust and Safety at Google. And in an interview that she gave, she was basically promoting the Russia collusion hoax And she basically said that the Russians were weighing in heavily to get Donald Trump elected in 2016. So she was part of the lie that Putin was the one who got Trump elected. Now, Trump himself, for his part, I think he's become fully aware of the extent of this, quote, spooks to Silicon Valley pipeline. He's actually proposed new laws that would outlaw that would prevent people leaving the deep state, leaving government for a number of years, say 7 years, before they could now reappear on these digital platforms as the sort of censor-in-chief or part of the censorship regime over there. This is a very disturbing development, and it shows that the tentacles of the deep state are not merely in the government, but also in the very sector that determines what you and I can say on social media platforms.